boy. So you know how I just posted a book haul video a few weeks ago? I seem to have fallen into a stress book buying spiral in the past few weeks, shall we say? And I've accumulated quite a stack here, courtesy of thrift books, not sponsored. The books in this stack that are almost as tall as me when I'm sitting down are all nonfiction books that I've picked up recently. I believe there are 29 of them. Yikes. Sometime next week I will be posting the fiction part of this unhinged book haul. But without further ado, let's get started because truly there are an obscene amount of books in front of me right now. The first book that I have is A Horse at Night on Writing by Amina Cain. This was a book that I feel like was really popular in my personal niche of booktubers that I watch a few years ago. And since I've had it in the back of my mind to pick up, this and several of the books in this nonfiction haul are going to be books related to writing, the writing process, creatives. A series of essayistic inquiries come together to form a sustained meditation on writers and their works, on the spaces of reading and writing fiction and how these spaces take shape inside a life. Sold. Next is a book that my lovely friend Michelle picked up for me as she herself was placing a order on thrift books and needed a few dollars more to get free shipping. Very kindly got me this book. This is Bodies in Motion and at Rest on Metaphor and Mortality by Thomas Lynch. Thomas Lynch is the writer of one of my favorite essay collections, The Undertaking, Stories from the Life of the Dismal Trade, which is about his role as poet and undertaker for a small town in Michigan. This, I believe, is another collection of his essays. I'm really meaning to reread that initial collection that I read and adored, but I'm also definitely intrigued to read more of his work. Next we have 4 essay collections by none other than Rebecca Solnit. Starting off we have Call Them By Their True Names, American Crises and Essays by Rebecca Solnit. This is Solnit's collection revolving around gun violence in America, as well as other issues of widespread violence in the US that we as Americans are often misdirected from actually addressing in wider political and news landscapes. The Faraway Nearby, this sounds a bit more like a memoiristic essay collection by Solnit. The description of this says that it is Solnit exploring the ways that we make our lives out of stories and how we're connected by empathy, by narrative, by imagination, while unpacking some of her own stories from her own life. The Paradise Built in Hell, The Extraordinary Communities That Arise in Disaster. This is a collection where Solnit is exploring the empathy of civil society in the wake of disasters. It was originally published in 2009, but I'm sure it will feel readily applicable to the present day. Quote, "Why is it that in the aftermath of a disaster, whether man-made or natural, people suddenly become altruistic, resourceful, and brave? What makes the newfound communities and purpose many find in the ruins and crises after a disaster so joyous? And what does this joy reveal about ordinary unmet societal desires and possibilities?" And then the final Rebecca Solnit collection that I picked up for this haul is Wanderlust, A History of Walking. This sounds like it's an essay collection exploring the history and relationship between walking and thinking, and the preservation of time and space in which to walk in an ever more car-dependent and accelerated world. Too Much and Not the Mood by Durga Chew-Bose. I apologize if I mispronounced her name. This is, as you probably guessed, another essay collection. This is one that I heard about from my friend Katie, who considers this a favorite of hers, and I don't know much about it other than what I was able to glean from a brief glance at the description, where the sentence, "Chew-Bose captures the inner restlessness that keeps her always on the brink of creative expression," which definitely caught my eye and made me want to pick this one up, as well as knowing that it is a favorite of Katie's. So I recently read a chapter pertaining to Susan Sontag and her early years as a writer in Paris in a book that I'm currently reading called Dreaming in French. It definitely intrigued me and compelled me to pick up a collection of her journals and notebooks from those earlier years. So this is a collection of her journals from 1947 to 1963 titled Reborn. It's Pride Month and I wanted to have more queer history books on my shelves to choose from, and this is one that I've had my eye on for several years. This is Gay New York, Gender, Urban Culture, and the Making of the Gay Male World, 1890 to 1940 by George Chauncey. Yeah, again, this is one that I've had my eye on for several years. It is a nice chunky tome, and I may not get to it this Pride season, but rest assured I will be getting to it hopefully in the next year. Speaking of tomes, the next book is definitely a chunky, heavy book, and that is The Art of the Personal Essay, an anthology from the classical era to the present by Phillip Lopate, edited by Phillip Lopate. This is something that I picked up as a bit of a personal resource for my own creative writing projects. At the moment, I'm working on several personal essays, and so personally I wanted to pick this collection up as a nice resource to dip in and out of and get to try out a bunch of different writers who wrote essays. Next, I have two books by Annie Dillard. First, we have The Writing Life by Annie Dillard. This is Dillard's essay collection on writing, as the title suggests, and I'm torn between starting with this one as my first Dillard or the other book by hers that I picked up, which is Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. This won her the Pulitzer Prize in Literature in 1974. I've heard that it is extremely meditative with beautiful prose, focused on Dillard's curiosity for the natural world around her. So definitely looking forward to picking up one or both of these quite soon. Prisons We Choose to Live Inside of by Doris Lessing. This was a book that I had not heard of until I came across it in the Thrift Books suggested books category based on what you have been looking at and purchasing recently, which is honestly a very dangerous section for me to look at. This is quite a slim book, and I'm for the most part just going off of the title and the vague knowledge that it is a collection of a series of lectures given by Doris Lessing in the 1980s. So we'll see how this goes. Next is a book that does not have a dust jacket, but it is Intimate Matters, A History of Sexuality in America by John D'Amelio and Estelle B. Friedman. This originally came out in 1988 and is reportedly the first full-length study of the history of sexuality in the United States, tracing the history of American perspectives on sexual relationships from the nation's founding through to the present day. Next, we have a book called Marriage, A History, How Love Conquered Marriage by Stephanie Kuntz. This is a social history of the institution of marriage, how the idea, or rather the ideal of marrying someone that you are in love with, that it is something of an emotional commitment, is very much a modern day thing, in contrast with the centuries old social institution of marriage. So definitely quite intrigued to delve into this one, as well as the next one, which relates to this topic. We have A History of the Wife by Marilyn Yalom. Apologies if I mispronounce that. This is definitely in a similar vein to that previous book that I mentioned. This book outlines the roles, customs, and cultural position of women in Western marriages. Yalom reportedly leaned heavily into researching diaries, newspapers, journals, personal letters, and she interweaves these with citations from laws that were on the record, general customs of the time, religious rites, and civic procedures, all to do with wives and marriage. All in all, hopefully painting an interesting and nuanced picture of what it meant to be a wife over the span of thousands of years in Western history. Recently, I have really found myself being drawn to and interested in learning more about the Weimar Republic era in Germany, the time period between the First and the Second World Wars. And as I was perusing books of that nature, I came across Weimar Culture, The Outsider as Insider by Peter Gay. This was apparently published in the 1960s as a study of German culture between the two world wars. Quote, tracing the rise of the artistic, literary, and musical culture that bloomed ever so briefly in the 1920s amid the chaos of Germany's tenuous post-World War I democracy and crashed violently in the wake of Hitler's rise to power. I'm hoping that this will be a nice cultural overview of that time period. Yeah, looking forward to this. Next is another book that I came across in that dangerous "we think you would like this book because you've looked at these books" section on Thrift Books, and that is Red China Blues, My Long March from Mao to Now by Yan Wang. I never heard of this memoir before, but the title is definitely what intrigued me initially, and then reading the description, I knew I really wanted to pick it up, and I will read you a snippet of that. Yan Wang, a Canadian of Chinese descent, went to China as a starry-eyed Maoist in 1972 at the height of the Cultural Revolution. A true believer and one of only 2 Westerners permitted to enroll in Beijing University, she renounced rock and roll, hauled pig manure in the paddy fields, and turned in a fellow student who sought her help in getting to the United States. Startling, ironic, and deeply personal, Red China Blues follows Wang's rocky romance with Maoism from the #1 machine tool factory to Tiananmen Square, and through the individual and events she encounters during her years as a correspondent in China, Wang reveals long-hidden dimensions of the world's most populous nation and comes to terms with the legacy of her ancestral homeland. That sounds fascinating to me. Yet another, I bought it because of the title, purchase from thrift books, and this is Commodify Your Dissent, Salvos from the Baffler by Thomas Frank and Mark Wheel. At a closer look, I think that this is a compilation of essays or publications from the Baffler, which I had not heard of before looking into this book, but this was written and originally published in the 1990s, and it sounds like it is a strongly worded attack on market populism, the idea that the market always arrives at an optimal wealth distribution, and that the market is the only true source of democracy. Quote, in the old Gilded Age, the barons and businesses accumulated vast wealth and influence from their railroads, steel mills, and banks. But today it is a culture that stands at the heart of the American enterprise, mass entertainment, and the economic dynamo that brings the public into the consuming fold and consolidates the power of business over the American mind. This book is a powerful polemic against the designs of the culture business on us all. Interested to see what this book holds, and also to see if some of it holds up in the 2020s compared to when it was written in the 1990s, if, say, some of their claims or predictions still ring true, or if they were off the mark. This is a book that I've had on my radar for several years now, and I decided to go ahead and get it. It is a topic that is a little bit niche, I'll admit, but I wanted to mention it anyways. The concept and the study of memory within history and academic historical circles, how we remember things individually as well as collectively, is something that fascinates me. This book is an introduction to the debates and theories around memory and the range of approaches on how to study it within history as well as other disciplines. Again, a bit niche, might not be everybody's cup of tea, but it's my cup of tea. Next, I have a few books by Patti Smith, two of which have come in, and the third I'm still waiting on coming in the mail to me, but I thought I would mention all three. And to start, I have M Train. I read and adored Patti Smith's memoir, Just Kids, and have wanted to pick up pretty much anything by her that I've seen since. M Train is a meditation on travel, detective shows, literature, and coffee, according to the description. Woven throughout are reflections on the writer's craft and on artistic creation. Here, too, are singular memories of Smith's life in Michigan and the irredeemable loss of her husband, Fred Sonic Smith. The other memoir of hers that I have in physical form is Year of the Monkey. This is a memoir of a year in her life where she sort of set about to solitary wandering. In it, she's contemplating being on the precipice of entering a new decade of her life. All of that sounds quite interesting to me. And then the final Patti Smith book that has not come in yet is Wool Gathering. This sounds like it's a memoir where Patti Smith is looking back at her childhood and some of the memories and events that propelled her into a life of creation and artistic expression. It is, quote, a celebration of the sacred nature of creating and the fierce and vital pleasures of things like stargazing and wandering. This is a natural history book that caught my eye. This is Ravens in Winter by Bernard Heinrich. Natural history is an area of reading that I haven't really delved into before, so interested to see what it holds for me, but also I just am interested in the subject. Ravens and corvids are birds that I find quite fascinating. There are a number of ones in my area as well. Why do ravens, generally understood to be solitary creatures, share food between each other during winter? On the surface, there didn't appear to be any biological or evolutionary imperative behind the raven's willingness to share. The more Bernd Heinrich observed their habits, the more odd the bird's behavior became. What started as mere curiosity turned into an impassioned research project, and Ravens in Winter, the first research of its kind, explores the fascinating biological puzzle of the raven's rather unconventional social habits. And here we have a collection of some biographic snapshots of Italian writers that I had not heard of for the most part before. This is Open City, 7 Writers in Post-War Rome, edited by William Weaver. The writers discussed in this collection are, I apologize for any mispronunciation I'm about to commit, but we have Ignazio Zellone, Giorgio Bassani, Alberto Moravia, Elsa Morante, Natalia Ginsberg, Carlo Levi, and Carlo Emile. Definitely feeling compelled to read more from and about authors who were writing during or in the aftermath of things like war, political turmoil, poverty, etc. And I certainly feel like this book fits that description. This is another essay collection that I had on my radar for quite a while, and my friend Katie, previously mentioned, wrote a Substack essay about this recently and her thoughts on it, and it was sort of the push that I needed in order to actually pick up a copy of my own. I will link her Substack essay down below if you're interested in giving it a read. As someone who has recently entered the last year of her 20s, I'm definitely feeling more and more compelled to look back on this past decade of my life and thinking about the things that I've learned and grown from. And I think one of the big things for me has been grappling with intimacy in different forms, being driven by this desire for intimacy and companionship, both romantic and platonic, and figuring out the ups and downs and my own personal boundaries when it came to what I wanted and what it was that I realized I wasn't willing to tolerate. This essay collection sounds like it is also a reflection on the nature of internal muckraking in your messy, chaotic 20s and looking back on the period of young adulthood where you're just starting to figure things out. Having started to delve into the realm of creative nonfiction about the creative process, I feel like it was only a matter of time until I came across The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And so I have picked up, this is one of the few new books that I have purchased recently, picked up my own new copy of this. And this originally came out in the 90s, early 2000s. It is essentially a guidebook by Cameron on unlocking your creativity, your creative potential, unlearning some things that you may have taken on in childhood that are holding you back from fully accepting yourself as a creative. I would love to do a vlog or a vlog series documenting my experience with this. Let me know if you would be interested in seeing that. And then also by Julia Cameron, we have The Right to Write, an invitation and initiation into the writing life. This is very much in the same vein as her previous book. I think one of the biggest hurdles that I've had to get over when it comes to my own writing has been giving myself permission to do it. And to be honest, it's still a hurdle sometimes for me to get myself over, so I'm curious to see how I get on with some of the things that Cameron talks about in this book. I believe I've heard that there are various writing prompts, mainly journal writing prompts in here that I'm very interested to check out. Next is a book that I don't have physically in my hands, but it is still on its way to me, but I thought it would still be relevant to mention it in this haul. This is Dancing in the Streets, A Collective History by Barbara, I'm gonna butcher this last name, my apologies, Ehrenreich. This was yet another book on thrift books that the title is what initially grabbed me, but it sounds like it's going to be a cultural history of collective joy, of communal celebration, feasting, costuming, dancing, etc. The description says that it discusses various examples throughout history, as well as why in large part this kind of expression has been looked down on at times and sometimes suppressed by elites who feared that it would undermine the social structures of the day. And then finally we have a poetry collection that is still in transit to me, and that is Oracles, A Pilgrimage by Catherine M. Valente, who is one of my favorite authors. And this is the first poetry collection of hers that I have picked up, and can we just have a moment for this cover, which I will be popping up on the screen over here. The oracles of the ancient world spoke for the gods, they spoke for the future, but they could not speak for themselves. Here their voices bubble up from the depths, enraged and sardonic, sorrowing and wild, finding themselves on new ground, scattered across the American continent, marking a path for the seeker to follow, from New England universities to Hawaiian volcanoes, from dilapidated factories and Chinatown kitchens, from the Old East to the New West. This sounds incredible and I can't wait to dive in. Alright folks, that is the first part of my massive unhinged book haul. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you have read any of these books or if any of these books caught your eye. If you're interested in seeing my future thoughts on these books and you aren't already subscribed, I'd love to have you subscribe. But I hope you all are having a great day, evening, whatever time it may be when you're watching this, and I will see you in my next video for part 2, where I'm hauling the fiction books that I have bought recently. But until then, take care and I will see you soon.